Hi there, welcome to the Carr Brothers. It's episode 114 on CHCO TV, on our Facebook page, on YouTube, and later on your favorite podcaster. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff, the second of the three Carr brothers. Jody sends his regrets. He is away tonight, so hopefully he's watching on Facebook Live or CHCO Television.
That's right.
In St. Andrews. So, Jack, we've got ourselves a real interesting guest tonight. We're going to have a great conversation about the Greener Village, the greater Fredericton area food bank, and the whole idea of food reclamation, all of the services that Greener Village provides for people in the Fredericton area.
Greater Fredericton, so how about you can introduce our
guest. Shall I introduce us?
Yes,
so tonight we have with us Alex Boyd, the director, I guess you are, the CEO of the Greener Village in Fredericton. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's nice to be able to talk about these things that are so important in our community.
Yes, and I think what we really want to hit on tonight, Jack, and you will have other questions, but a lot of the advantages and the services that you provide, how many people you provide the services to, the unique services, and then we'll get into food reclamation and maybe some long-term goals and some expansion ideas. And I think the sky's the limit when it comes to the service you provide, because they're becoming more and more important. Food insecurity is becoming an issue, so we want to get into a lot of those things tonight. We only have an hour, just letting you know.
I'll try to temper that a little bit, because I get pretty excited about talking about this stuff.
Yes. Well, it's great. So how about you tell us first your role with the Greener Village and how that came to be, and also what the Greener Village is.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Greener Village, so that's my full-time occupation, to be there and to be leading the team to try to provide those food security services that are so important. And I first got involved actually my first year of university. I was looking for some volunteer things to do while I was going to UNB, and someone suggested that I come and try volunteering at the food bank. And the food bank at that time was back on Grand Dam Street.
Oh, wow, that long ago.
Yeah, so almost 20 years ago now that I first got involved. And they say that food banking is a little bit of it's so passionate for people that you kind of never move beyond it. If once you're involved with the food bank, you get engaged, you kind of stay engaged. So I started doing that volunteering, and my first volunteer job was to interview clients in a office that wouldn't be much bigger in diameter than this table. And it was just learning client stories and hearing what the things they're struggling with and trying to be as helpful for them as possible. That really got to my heart and made me want to continue to work in that. So I've been involved for a long time and watched the food bank obviously go through some significant development in that time. And it's been really rewarding to see the changes that we can make for people and the way that we can support them in their journey to self-sufficiency. And that's why food banking is such a thing that's so passionate for me, and can hear it in my voice. It's just something I love to do to help people.
So now, when people think of the food bank, I think it's expanded, and it's not just because it's very important to hand out food, but it's not only that, is it?
No, it certainly has moved a long ways beyond that, and it really came from an idea of knowing that despite the best efforts of food bankers across the country for more than 40 years now, the provision of food alone cannot actually stop the root causes of people needing food, not having access to food. And so when we were able to purchase a new property in 2011 and move it in 2012, we really tried our best to develop a kind of a 4-pillar model. So the food bank being our central pillar. Imagine, if you will, a cell phone tower. It's quite tall, but it usually doesn't stand independently. It has support around it. And so our other 3 pillars are our learning kitchen, where we employ a Red Seal chef in our Class 5 kitchen to teach people how to cook, to teach people how to preserve, to basically anything from plot to plate, that our chef can actually teach people how to do that very well. Because if you don't know how to cook, if you can't understand the nutritional ingredients of the food, those are all contributing factors to food insecurity. Not just access to food, but knowledge about food. And our second of the 3 pillars that support is our growing program. So we have 4 greenhouses where we grow our own high quality produce in to provide to food bank clients, try to get them the best food we can. And we also have a community garden where people can learn how to grow themselves. It's the age-old adage, we've all heard it.
Yes.
You give a man a fish, he eats today. If you teach a man to fish, then he'll be able to feed himself for a long time. And so the gardening program is very much related to that. Is if we can give people the skills that they need to be able to grow food, that's a skill that they're going to keep for a very long time. And I always like to tell a story about a client that we had who was a newcomer to Canada and wanted to grow tomatoes. And his goal was, I know how to make pasta sauce. I'm an excellent cook. I can take these tomatoes and I can make wonderful meals for my family. And so we gave him his bed, and his bed was, I think, 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. And he said, I'm going to grow as many tomatoes as possible. So we gave him the seeds. We had it all ready for him, and away he went. And we came back a couple of weeks later rather, and his bed was full of tomato plants, like grass seed. And if you know anything about tomatoes, they actually require space to grow up, grow out, and produce fruit. Well, he didn't know that. He thought more seeds means more tomato plants, which means more tomatoes. And so we were able to give him some advice on how to grow tomatoes. And at the end of the year, he had such a bumper crop, he actually donated some back to other food bank clients to be able to help them.
Awesome.
He's since moved to Toronto. This was a few years back. The food hampers that we provided to his family, long consumed. Very important for his family at the time, but long consumed. His ability to grow tomatoes, his forever. As long as he can find a place to grow and the resources, he can continue to utilize that skill. And that's why Greener Village has become much more than just a food bank. Not that, once again, providing food is not enough, but we have to look at the situation different.
Wow.
So the last pillar is our clothing boutique, which is a clothing bank and a clothing boutique mixed together. So the general public can come and shop in our boutique. It helps us to raise money to buy milk and eggs. It helps us to be able to provide that service well. But food bank clients are able to get gift cards, and they can actually go in there and shop for the things that mean the most to their family. And that's the thing that we don't determine for them. We don't say, oh, well, you can only buy clothes, or you can only buy boots, or you can only buy a winter coat. We let them decide what's the most meaningful for their family. And so what might be most meaningful for them is a book that they can read together, or maybe a special thing for someone's birthday coming up, and they get to make those choices. And unfortunately, especially for people who are facing financial and food insecurity, choices are something that is often taken away from them just because of their circumstances. So giving those people those choices in the boutique is important. So when we put those things together, now instead of just having our food bank standing alone, we have a support structure around that supports the clients and supports the organization and makes it much more stable as an overall organization.
And when you talk about the cooking classes and also the community garden, is that open to the general public?
Yeah, so we
as well?
have
Tell us a little bit more about the cooking part of it, your kitchen.
Yeah, so our Red Seal Chef Eve is, you can actually see him on our Facebook page and YouTube and all over the place, but he's very much a hands-on learning person. We learn by doing typically, not by watching. So no one comes into the kitchen and just watches people cook. We find a way to engage anyone who comes in to actually start cooking. So we have some classes that are geared specifically to our clients, like our collective kitchens, for instance, where client families can come together. They actually make meals with Chef Eve, and then they all take home the meals all portioned out, so they get to take home some extra resources in ready-made meals that they can heat and eat. But we also have a host of classes that are open to client and community members side by side. And it's very deliberate that we do that because we're trying to remove stigma around needing food bank services. The thing that probably grieves my heart the worst is the thought of somebody in the community needing help but feeling too ashamed to ask for help.
Right.
So we try to do a lot of things to make foot traffic at Greener Village common, to have people come in. So they come into our learning kitchen for classes and they get their hands dirty,
so to speak. Yes,
so to speak.
I know what you mean.
Right away. So if you came to a Bread Mondays class, for instance, where we're teaching people how to make bread, you're not going to come and watch someone else bake bread. You're going to be kneading dough with your hands in a very short time. Chef Eve's going to teach you how to do that. He's going to teach you how to form the loaves. He's going to teach you how to put them in the pans, and then he's going to bake them. The nice part is when you go through that whole process, at the end, the baked product is going to go into food bank campers. So not only are you learning valuable skills on baking bread, you're also using those newfound skills to provide food product for food bank clients. And so that's why that program especially has garnered a fair bit of attention, even being featured in the Washington Post earlier this year, because people are like, oh, the thought of actually creating something at a food bank is maybe a little bit outside of what people think of when they think food banks. They don't necessarily think of a group of volunteers coming together to make a loaf of bread like grandma's loaf of bread that people can share. So.
Well, and it's also having that experience, not only the experience of cooking, but as you mentioned, the experience of giving back and what that does for the soul and for the heart. So it's some may have not experienced that much. So when you're giving back and what that does.
Yeah, it's a learning class mixed with volunteerism, mixed with creation for the food bank. So it's really a great mix. And so we have people who have never baked bread before in their lives who just want to give some time and help. And so they're becoming expert bread bakers as they volunteer. We got people who are very seasoned bakers who want to be helpful and want to give their skills. We have people who are clients who are saying, hey, I can't support the food bank, food bank supporting me, but this is a way that I can give a few hours and I can help to make product that other food bank clients are going to enjoy too. So just a way for us to kind of mix the community and build community. And the people who bake bread, they laugh. I mean, our whole office smells like bread, which is pure torture every Monday.
Oh, I bet.
But the group that are doing it together, they're just having a great time and they're creating something as they do it. So that's what our Learning Kitchen's all about: is getting your hands on and being able to create.
Speaking of that, I think I've seen on Facebook a group of ladies from out our way that come in every now and then and help out in the kitchen.
It's very possible.
I so,
we got a pretty wide
search
array.
it on Facebook, but I know I saw it somewhere.
That's pretty cool.
It
well,
is.
It's like when, growing up with our parents or grandparents, they, they'd say, oh, well, do this and do that to help out. Like the hands-on, as you mentioned.
Absolutely.
And so it's an excellent concept. When you're learning to cook as well, dig right in. You can't ruin. Well, you can, but you can't make a big catastrophe.
You're not going to get good at it unless you try.
Yeah.
Get your hands in there. So,
and what better way to do it than under the supervision of a Red Seal chef?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, if you've ever eaten any of Chef Yusud, he's very good at what he does. So when you do that under his direction, you're going to pick up those skills. He's gonna correct you in the right way so that you become a better cook.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. If we can be really intentional with how we handle food and how we cook food and how we consume food, then we're starting to change the conversation from a very consumer society where food is just like an end product that we put in our mouths and we eat for the sake of building energy and continuing on work. But food always has been for humans much deeper than that. So we want to kind of reintroduce those concepts and say, hey, let's think of food as more than just a resource that we consume, but something that we're connected to deeply.
Nice. So the second part of Jack's question there was about the greenhouse plots for clients and public, I guess. So do you rent space to generate revenue too in those plots for the public?
So we have all clients are able to register for beds, and we waive the registration fee for them. But for for community members that want to engage in the garden, maybe they're living in an apartment, they don't have a space where they can grow. We have a small fee that we charge as a registration fee that helps us with the soil amendments and the different parts that we're going to invest into the gardens. And once again, it's a good mix of clients who are gardening and community members who are gardening, all working together and helping each other. And so it's just kind of fun to watch the gardens develop because everyone has a little bit different style in their gardens. We have some people who you can tell that they want their garden to really look amazing. So they've got like beautiful trellises that they build by hand. And then you have other people who are just, you can tell that function and production is their kind of goal. So it's kind of fun to watch the garden develop. But the nice part is when you come to Greener Village, you can walk through the gardens and it's peaceful and it's idyllic. And then, our beehives are buzzing off in the corner where the bees are pollinating the garden, and we have we have them working away and they're happy and they don't sting anybody. And it's just a nice place to be.
They're not cranky bees.
They're not cranky bees. They're feeding they're doing all their feeding in a community garden that we're then able to harvest honey and use in our programming. So it's just kind of a fun way to enjoy the city without really having to go far. And once again, the more people that come into Greener Village for a variety of reasons, removes the stigma of going to the food bank. Because people think that, and unfortunately, despite best efforts for a long time, people still say, do I want to go to the food bank? Or do I?
There's a stigma
There's a stigma around it.
Very much is.
And so everything that we can do to try to break those stigma walls down, we do.
Yeah. Oh, now tell me about the bees, though, just briefly. That's interesting. I didn't realize. So how long have you had beehives?
Yeah, I think we got our first beehive in probably 2018, 2019. Okay. And so it came from an actual donation from the New Brunswick Beekeepers Association. And they said, you've got community gardens. They're always looking to increase more beehives.
Yeah.
We wanted to protect our bees. They're a very important part of the food system. And at the time we were doing a monarch butterfly program as a pollinator program, trying to teach kids about pollination. And so, when we said, we have this offer of bees, we said, well, the monarch program is very brief, unfortunately, even though it's a very important program, it's very brief, but the bees actually live on site year round. So it's like, wow, we can transition to bees the bees can pollinate not only our community gardens but kind of the neighborhood. I think they range a fairly wide range, and then we can actually harvest honey. We can use it in our food programming. We use it in the learning kitchen. We can do little samples so people can understand it. And we're still accomplishing the pollination education that we want to do. It still kind of fits very well within our holistic view of how food works. So our bee program is pretty interesting, and I like to go and watch when our chef Eve's actually our beekeeper.
Oh, is he?
He digs in and he starts to evaluate them, and I'm standing like 6 or 7 feet away, and the bees are just. They're cool.
Yeah.
Like they're just not. People kind of think
They're not aggressive.
No, they think of bees as being stinging monsters, but they're just there to do their job, right? So it's a pretty neat program.
So does the greenhouse operate on the property year round? I think you have some in the back. Are they functioning year round?
No, not yet. So that's part of our development plans is to get those into the year-round production. Currently, they're like March, April, depending on what the spring is looking like, to November. So we succession plant so that we're planting the very hardy crops later in the summer so that they will continue to growing right in. We've actually been picking kale and things like that right in when the snow's on the ground. So we do that intentionally to try to get as much production as possible, but certainly one of my dreams is to see our greenhouses completely functional year round. Because if we can produce food for people that travels the least amount of distance to get to the people that need it. I mean, if we can pick it and walk it across the yard and then put it in a person's hands to feed their family, that product is good quality because it didn't have weeks and days to move around.
Right.
So it's
From country to
important.
continent to continent, one continent to the other, right?
Yeah, I always wonder when I see a product that's been grown on another continent and packaged in a different city and then moved here. How in the world is it perfectly ripe when it's sitting on the shelf? Was it perfectly ripe when it was picked, or I don't understand how that process works. And maybe somebody at home can educate me on that.
But the food professor could. Maybe someday we'll get him on here.
That's right.
He's Sylvain Charlebois,
Yes.
professor at Dal, I think it is. And he knows everything food related. So
I've heard him speak before. He's inspiring.
He's been talking a lot online and in the media lately about food insecurity and the price of food and everything around it, and inflation, how it affects, and shrinkflation. He's been talking about a lot. So, luckily, you're going to address and you're going to continue to work on food insecurity and to make people become food secure.
Yeah,
help them become food secure.
Yeah, that's obviously our vision, right?
It
that
is.
Everyone can have the resources they need to thrive. That's our vision statement. That's what we have to work towards.
Right.
Does the food bank partner with schools or anything? Is there programs that go on there?
Yeah,
in between.
So we do partner on a breakfast program that we provide to the schools, but we also partner with a variety of schools on learning programs as well. So one notable one going on right now is a class with Leo Hayes for students that are having a hard time at the academic setting, and so they're coming in and they're learning cooking skills. So they're getting that once again, same thing, hands-on. So one of the mothers actually sent us a little note to say, every day getting my kid up for school is a nightmare. It's a constant war to get my kid up for school. We could probably relate to that at some point. They said the day before they're going to Greener Village, they tell me, wake me up half an hour early so I can get my bus. So they're excited to get engaged and get their hands on these pieces. So the school education part has been hard since COVID especially, but it's starting to come again to get more kids in the kitchen learning. And so what we do is we split them up into groups. So if we have a 20 kid class and they have 4 or 5 kid groups and they each get a part of the meal. So you guys get the salad, you guys get the main, you guys get the dessert, you guys get the bread or biscuits or whatever it is, and then they take those on and the chef teaches them how to do it, and then they have to give a little presentation on what they did.
Wow.
So I made the biscuits, this is what we learned, this is what we realized was hard, and they're sharing that with their classmates, and then they all share the meal. Sharing the meal is the part that, and it's the part that really bonds
the camaraderie.
People. We all know that if you want to get to know somebody, sit down and have a meal with them. That's how you kind of build human connection.
Social connection.
So for your breakfast program, that would take a lot of hands, a lotot of people. Are you always looking for volunteers and people to come in and help with that, or
we're always looking for volunteers on everything. Right. The reality is, even though we have a staff of 14, which is quite large,
it is.
If we had to have staff to replace all the volunteers we'd have to triple our staff easily or more. Thousands and thousands of volunteer hours each and every month. So we're always looking for more people who want to engage, and the kind of the fun part of Greener Village from a volunteer standpoint is maybe food hampers aren't really your thing. You don't want to lug boxes and you don't want to pack cans. That's important, but maybe that's not what you're interested in. Maybe you're interested in fashion, or you're interested in gardening, or you're interested in cooking, or you're interested in any number. We have a whole host of volunteer opportunities for pretty much everybody.
So you can welcome in just about any skill set there is.
Absolutely, any skill set, any ability that we can find ways for people to engage. So we do our school program in partnership with FDA in Moncton. And so the schools order, and then the resources come to us, and then we split it apart and we deliver it to all of the schools. So anytime someone wants to help out, they can reach us at, I think it's volunteers@greenervillage.ca is the email that they can send it to. We can find it on Facebook as well. So they can engage in that way and find the volunteer niche that makes the most sense for them and what they're passionate about and what they're excited about and where they have skill sets that can really be of huge benefit. And what's happened quite often is people will come in with a thought process of, I want to volunteer and do this, and then realize, oh, but I've got skills that this organization can use. And I think of our past president, Ken Little, who was a VP at MB Power for 25 years or something like that. And he said, I came to volunteer, and all I want to do is pack campers and decompress from this this business life that I've lived.
Of course.
And within a few months, he was helping with business modeling, and he was helping with long-term planning. He was instrumental in helping us move to the new property. Like, so sometimes you don't realize that you have these kind of almost superpowers for an organization like Greener Village, and you come in and say, oh, well, I could build anything. Oh, well, we could use some help with maintenance and with building projects. So it's kind of fun to watch people engage and utilize those skills to help people.
Well, and then discover as well skills that they didn't even know that they had, but an opportunity to be able to expose that.
Yeah, and a good example is Gary, and Gary's been a volunteer for a number of years, probably over 10 years. And volunteered in our warehouse and helped out with a number of things. But in this last year, he's also become a bread baking volunteer. He comes every Monday. So now he's home making bread for his wife, and she's like, I would never have imagined a day when you were baking bread for us to have as opposed to whatever else.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've never baked bread before I started volunteering, but he's learning new skills and actually engaging more. He's like, I just love the fact that I can create something that can go to the food bank client, right? So that's what his passion is, but he's becoming really good at it at the same time. And he's been happy to share a story, so he won't feel bad about it if he sees that on the show.
Do you have any stories with the student program when they come in and come on site and volunteer and learn about cooking, or anything that comes to mind where it's made a difference?
Yeah, so I go back to that Leo Hayes example again, and how, especially for kids that are struggling, having something that's tangible that they can do, a way that they can. So if you go in on Friday morning when they're there, the music's blaring and they're having a good time and they're laughing and they're just enjoying being together, which isn't always the case. I mean, school, I remember school well. It's not always easy. It can be stressful. There can be conflict and all those things, but not in our learning kitchen. They're just there having a great time, and they're deciding what they want to cook. So they say, you know what? Next week I want to learn about donaires. It cost me like $15 for 2 good donaires. Well, if you could teach me how to make good ones that I can make at home, then maybe I can get the parts and I can do it for lunch.
Yeah.
And some of these kids are going to end up, in their own living situations within the next couple of years. So if we can gain them those skills, then that's going to help them in a very tangible way for a very long time. So. But it's always about trying to drive it the way that the client or the user is showing us is the most advantageous for them. And that's kind of what kind of guides our development as we go, is what are people telling us is the most advantageous for them and for their families. And so we always think of that when we're trying to drive development.
So how many you get these questions all the time, I'm sure, but how many clients do you have? And I think I saw it's gone up, but I can't remember what the numbers were. But
yeah, you talked about inflation and shrinkflation and all those things, and certainly that's a great way to segue into the numbers that we're seeing. So we're currently seeing about 2,100 families each month. So that's 40% more than this time last year, which is 40% more than the year before, which is about 20% more than the year before.
So wow, 20, 40, and 40. Yeah,
so we have these kind of, I don't even know if the right word, meteoric rises in client demand that we're seeing. And it's 99% driven by cost of living, inflation, rents, gas prices. If you were in 2020 squeaking to get by, you're underwater now.
Right.
That's just the nature of it.
Economics of it.
The economics of it. So when we see those big increases, it's disconcerting, especially when you're working on an agency that wants to have meat, milk in every hamper, eggs in every hamper, produce in every hamper, all of those food groups that you want to have a balanced hamper. But you think if you want to provide carrots, apples, oranges, potatoes, and greens to every food hamper, you know what that's going to cost you at the grocery store for one package of each. Imagine doing it 2,100 times. It gets really challenging really fast. So
it's alarming.
It is alarming. So we need to, I think that what we're learning through this process, and we've known it for a while, but it's becoming starkly clear to the Food Bank Network in Canada that we need to think outside the box and think, okay, it's not just about feeding people today, but preventing that hunger tomorrow. What do we have to do to try to have some upstream intervention? How do we give clients the best case scenario for recovering from the position that they find themselves in today and to have a more bright future? That self-sufficiency part is important. So it's kind of interesting. I sit on a couple of committees provincially and nationally, and the one I sit on nationally is an innovation committee, and that's what it's all bent on, is how do we have a deeper impact? How do we make sure that we're not 40 years from now saying the same thing that we said today?
Right.
So it's kind of very interesting to hear that conversation from people as far west as Vancouver, as far up as Whitehorse, all through the prairies, and as far east as Fredericton, New Brunswick, and we're all having that kind of conversation on how we can make an impact.
So when you sit on a national committee like that and you're thinking of these strategies and putting these plans together, where does that go after that? Does it go to government? Tell us how we can move that up that street.
Yeah. So this committee is specifically a Food Banks Canada committee. Okay. So it's helping Food Banks Canada to understand the role that it can play and inform a strategic plan. Certainly, part of the strategic plan will be how do we better inform government? How do we help them understand the major issues? And how do we watch the trends? And that's one of Greener Village's, I think, major strengths is we're very cognizant of stats and of collecting good information so that we can inform trends. Because if we have a certain client demographic that's on the rise, significantly on the rise, that's a flag that we need to say, hey,
try to get ahead of it.
Maybe it's maybe the rise is in seniors, and we've seen that in the Food Bank Network in the last few years. The senior number is going up disproportionately. So other ones are too, but the senior one is more so. That's a problem. And if we don't have the information, then we can't share the information with the people who are in government, who can say, okay, if that's a big problem, we need to say what we can do to address that. So certainly, as you think of innovation, advocacy work kind of goes hand in hand with that innovation. I was able to speak to the Parliament Committee on Finance, and my message to them was, government needs to be there to help organizations with innovation and help us to adapt and become better at what we do, because you can say, well, we're not going to need food banks anymore, but I don't think that that's a realistic thing to think. Instead, how do we equip the food banks to have the deepest impact, use them as the social safety net they are, and help them to innovate and create new infrastructure so they can do their job really well. And that's what we're seeing happening more and more. We just need to keep moving that needle in that right direction.
So what is the criteria to qualify as a client?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So the Food Bank Network as a whole, and Greener Village is no exception, has kind of been through some pendulum swings. So there was a time when you didn't ask anyone any questions about anything, and they just came and you gave them food. There was a time when we had very specific, you must make under this amount of money and you must have this above this expense level or whatever. Now we're kind of in a happy medium where we're collecting information because we want to know the client experience, we want to get to know them, we want to be able to inform their position, we want to be able to create programming, but we're not saying you don't need help. So if someone comes to us and says, I need help, then we're going to believe them that they need help.
Right.
We're going to interview them, we're going to talk to them, we're going to try to understand what their situation is, but we're not going to say, no, you don't need help, you don't need our help, because life is way too nuanced for
to define what help means.
To say yes or no.
Right.
Right? Oh, so you don't need help because you have this, or you don't, you've all heard it. Well, geez, I drove by the food bank and someone was driving a pretty nice car. Well, that's a very, very simplistic answer to someone being at the food bank. You have no idea what's going on
Behind the scenes.
what job loss there may have been, what kind of lease they're stuck in that they can't get out. It's the only thing they own in the world, and if they cut out of that, they're going to have no ability to get to work.
Could be their home.
Could be their home. So we take a very non-judgmental but interested approach to trying to understand the client's situation, and so hopefully they also understand what we're trying to accomplish. And in that way, we believe that the number of people who are taking advantage is very small.
Right.
And we're very happy to have that small amount of abuse, so that the process isn't difficult for people who need it.
Right.
Because if you turn up the checks and balances so high that people are like, forget it, I can't.
Yeah.
That service is so intrusive into my life that I just am going to not take advantage of what I need.
One more complicated thing in their life.
Exactly. People who are struggling don't need more complication. They need someone to come beside them and say, I'll help you. Well, where you're
And
at.
highly confidential.
Yes, absolutely.
I know I've brought constituents in before into the Greener Village, and they didn't want to go at first,
Right.
but they felt comfortable going with maybe me or somebody they know, and reassure them that everything is going to be fine, and get them through the door, and you guys look after them quite well, and they don't have to visit too many times. It's just, I think, a confidence thing too, to get where they need to be.
Absolutely, and so some people are going to need a short-term help because of the situation they find themselves in, and some people are stuck in the cycle, and they're going to need a longer period of time with support from the food bank, and we're kind of here to meet both needs at the same time. For the person whose car broke down and they have a big repair bill, and a couple months from now they're not going to need food support because they're okay, and then people who've they've been generationally stuck in poverty, and in their mind the food bank is part of the life that they've always lived from the time that they were this big. So we get to kind of have a programming that meets a wide variety of people. People often ask, well, who's a food bank client? What does a food bank client look like? I'm like, they can't answer that question because there is no stereotypical food bank client like you're hoping that I can define. We have people who are newcomers. We have people who've been on our rolls for 15, 20 years. They're on disability. Their prospects are extremely limited because of their physical or mental health. So what are you going to say? Well, no, they can only be a food bank client for so long. That kind of doesn't really work.
So what is the definition, and then maybe that's broad as well, the definition of success for your clients?
Oh, that's a great question. So what we want to often say is success is a client who becomes self-sufficient and stands on their own 2 feet. But that's not the only definition of success. So I think of one of our success stories, and someone I'm proud to know. She's actually on our board of directors. Her name's Kimothy Stewart. She's very upfront with her story.
Watching.
Yeah.
She's watching.
She's watching right now.
Sorry.
I knew her when she
Oh no,
worked.
sorry, Karen Stewart.
Yeah, glasses.
Well, maybe
But Timothy worked at the New Brunswick Real Estate Association,
Yes,
and that's how I
absolutely.
got to first know her. So.
Okay.
And so she's been very open with her story, so she wouldn't mind me telling it.
Okay.
When she was a young single mother of 2 kids and trying to put herself through school, she needed the food bank. And she said, I'd leave my job at lunch hour, drive to Greener Village really quick, get my food, drive it home, and then drive back to work, because I didn't want people to know, because I felt that stigma.
Right.
And she obviously doesn't feel that stigma anymore, because now she shares her story very openly. But what she says is, but the Greener Village gave me the opportunity to think about school and not worry about food, because I couldn't worry about both. I couldn't get the education I needed while I was still scrambling to try to make sure my kids had lunch. So you guys took care of that for me so I could take care of the school. Since then, she's gone on and got a dream job.
Yeah.
And now she's on our board of directors giving back.
That's awesome.
That's success.
Yeah.
However,
That's her success.
That's her success.
Right.
But there's also people who have significant disabilities, whether they're mental or physical, who success for them is being alive and staying in their home. And so if we try to measure the success as Timothy's definition, that's short-sighted and doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's hard for us sometimes to measure success statistically, because statistically doesn't take into the account the nuance of life that people who are struggling feel. So we take success as anybody that we can support where they are now, any opportunity we have to inform people about how they can better, and then anytime we can empower somebody to take the step. And if we can do those three things in any format, we consider that successful.
Well, it was a great question, but it was an even better answer.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. It's exciting to watch the team
I bet.
engage with people and know that they're having an impact on lives, and that people are not the same because we're there to support them, and it's just, it's heartwarming.
What are the hard days?
So there can be a number of hard days. Struggles with making sure that we have the resources in place. It is, and I said, I was at a conference in Halifax for Food Banks Canada, and they asked the question, "How do you feel?" And the answers are hopeful and excited, and I said, food insecure, because for a food bank that relies on public support, we're in some respects very much in the same position as our clients are in that we are not self-sufficient. We're not independent. We do require other people to engage with us, and so we have to consistently be working to help that engagement. Opportunities like this where we're talking about it are obviously very important, but so I put that in, and it was the only one on the very bottom. And someone came up to me afterwards and said, "That was you," and I said, "Yeah." Like, I never thought of it that way, and I'm like, "Well, that's
what keeps you awake."
Those are the things that I think about, especially when we see these kind of massive number increases. I say, if this pace continues before 2030, we'll be serving 6,000-7,000 families a month, 8,000 families a month. Like, that's scary.
Yeah.
Well, so as the population increases, it's a proportion of that population that will be visiting the food bank as clients. So I think the discussion lately is that the city of Fredericton is going to double in size, or the general area will double in size.
Yeah.
So that not that very
and not far from now.
future.
No, so it's going to happen quite rapidly.
All service levels will, because of the proportion, will increase. So
So
we're glad you're there working at it.
And time to think outside the box.
Right.
I mean, it was in the news as well. I think it was on CTV that I saw there. But your upcoming project.
Yeah. What's the goal?
Yeah. So as we consider the numbers, we've been doing some research, and we had a certain event happen. It was a few years back now, but food banks struggle with fresh food. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that one of the criticisms of food banks is it's all processed, boxed, dried, canned food. And so not because food banks don't want to do more, but because it's hard to handle. And the way fresh food typically works in a food bank is one of three things. It's feast, it's purchased, or it's famine. And the most stable, of course, is it's purchased. I buy X number of bags of carrots and bags of potatoes each week, but that's the quite expensive one. But on the food donation side, it's often feast or famine. And so I'm going to tell the story about a feast and how that kind of spawned our development plan. So we had an opportunity in our food bank district. So at the time, there were 13 food banks that came into Fredericton to split apart a food donation that came from Moncton. And so we didn't know what it was before we got to the donation. It's kind of a blind thing.
Could have been anything.
Could have been anything. On this given day, I was actually driving the truck. I don't know why. It must have been short on volunteers, or the staff were busy. I was driving the truck, and I opened up the back of the tractor trailer, and it was carrots. As far as the eye could see, the entire tractor trailer was full of carrots. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, carrots are nutritious. Carrots are energy rich. They're versatile. They keep fairly well. It's pretty good. And a food bank behind me said, well, what are we going to do with those? And they were coming from a perspective of, I don't have a warehouse space that could hold these carrots. I don't have the storage space. I don't have the volunteer support to be able to split them into small bags. They were 50-pound bags. And I said, oh, shoot, there's something wrong in our network if we can't realize assets like a full tractor trailer load of fresh produce, because it's what we all want to be able to give people is the best quality food. And so that kind of started us on a project to say, what would we need to do to be able to handle those fresh food donations effectively and for a longer period of time? So I can't remember how much a tractor trailer load in poundage would be of carrots, but far outside of what the 13 food banks could provide to clients in a meaningful way. without giving them each a 50-pound bag, which doesn't really make sense to give.
Right.
If you give a client a 50-pound bag,
It's just gonna go to waste
You're
as well.
you're basically downloading the waste problem to them instead of taking care of it at your food bank.
Right.
So we started to do some research, and as we did the research, the food waste topic came up. And I remember I was sitting downtown at the exhibit center in a booth, and I was reading a report, and it said $30 billion was wasted in, I think the year at the time that they're reporting on was 2018. And I said $30 billion. And I wanted to fall off my chair.
$30 billion worth of food.
Worth of food wasted in Canada in that year.
Wow,
that report
1 year in Canada.
30 billion. And I said, food banks across the country struggle to get access to the food they need to provide to clients in a meaningful way. And so we were kind of blown away by that and said, okay, so there's something wrong in our system if we can be throwing masses of food away while people don't have access to that very same food. And so as we continued the research, the obvious question was, well, that's out west. Mm-hmm. Surely that's an Edmonton problem, or that's a Toronto problem, or whatever. But the reality is, in Atlantic Canada, it's about 450 million pounds of food a year that goes to waste. It gets plowed into farmer fields, it gets fed to livestock, it goes into the landfills. I don't know if you've been to the landfill, but the eagles up there are they're awful big. They can barely fly. They're so well fed. And so we said that the food waste problem is here in Atlantic Canada as well. So what we determined by the research was that the amount of food available to be rescued and repurposed into usable food and healthy food for people was dramatic and significant. So we were undertaking a food rescue project. So the goal is to build Atlantic Canada's first ever perishable food rescue center. So a 6,500 square foot building that's specifically designed to be able to grab those tractor trailer loads of carrots and go into the first part of the building. The first part of the building is triage. So that's where you evaluate.
What do we got?
Does this carrot have 6 weeks of life left in it at the right temperature, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, or is it bad tomorrow? That's an important question.
That's a great, triage.
You have to assess it. You have to assess it to find out where it is, because if it's got 6 weeks worth of life, then we can get a lot of it to food bank clients just as it is. And if we don't have to touch it, we don't want to touch it. We want to give it to them in the format that's the most broad. They can choose whatever they want to do with that product, and that's part of what we want to do. But if it has 2 weeks worth of life left in it, the reality is we're not going to be able to move that whole tractor trailer load to the end user before we have waste.
Enough.
The waste is going to happen because we just don't have enough longevity in that product. And that's what it goes from our triage center into the second part of our facility. So a 1,500 square foot commercially equipped kitchen. So that kitchen will have the proper equipment to be able to take any produce, any produce that we bring in, to peel, dice, steam, flash freeze, and package. So imagine that tractor trailer load of carrots. Even if it had 6 weeks worth of life left in it, you gave a third of it away fresh. You take the other 2/3, and within a few days you have thousands of pounds of frozen carrots that are in a healthy format that's not quite fresh, but it's awful close. Like we all know, the ones that you get from the freezer, they're good products.
Yeah,
you
we eat them all the time.
You eat them all the time. You can use them in pretty much anything that you're doing at home. You can put them in your soups and your stews, stir fry, anything at all. Yeah. And so, using the carrots as the example, once they're processed, that third part of our facility is commercial size refrigeration and freezer equipment. So that way we can hold the product at the proper temperature after processing until it can go to the end user. But when we're talking about 450 million pounds, that's not a Greener Village. That's not a Greener Village consumption. Mm-hmm. We're not putting out 450 million pounds worth of food. We're not even putting out 45 million pounds of food. That's just too big. Mm-hmm. So we started to say, what's the point of us? Not the point, but what's the benefit of us only making Greener Village food hampers better if there are other food banks that are still struggling the same way to provide that food? And so that's when we teamed up with Food Depot, Alma, Ontario, and Moncton. That's the provincial network. So since the story of the carrots, Food Depot now does delivery to all the food banks. They deliver food right to their doors. And so they do a delivery route in their truck, and then when the truck is at the last shop, they're empty, and they drive the empty truck back to Moncton. So I talked to their leadership and said, what would it look like if your empty trucks, while they're going down the Trans-Canada through New Maryland, took a detour, headed down the Vanier and headed to Greener Village, not the Vanier, headed in through town and headed to Greener Village, And instead of driving an empty truck back to Moncton, you're taking a full truck back to Moncton, a frozen product. Processed frozen product. And they said, oh, well, that would have very minimal cost impact to our operations because
you're going there anyway.
You're going to Moncton anyway. The truck empty versus the truck full, probably a little bit of gas consumption, maybe a little bit of wear and tear on the brakes and shocks, but in reality, in the grand scheme, not a big impact. But by doing so, they can then add that frozen product to their further distributions, elevating the level of food banks across the province. Then we said, okay, we've got the demand, we know that the supply side is high, now we've got a demand side that is province-wide. It doesn't just impact Greener Village, it actually helps to increase the food resources of the entire food bank network. And that's when our project really started to make sense. This is when we said, okay, this is how we can actually have an impact provincially. And it was interesting as we talked about that project, how it kind of became bigger. So now we're talking about food production. So we can create food from donated product, absolutely. But what about product that we want to create ourselves? What about us taking our gardens and mass producing for the purpose of processing at the end and having stuff all winter long that is Greener Village grown, Greener Village processed, and Greener Village provided to clients? Yeah, that's something that we can do if we have the facility to be able to process it. We can't do it now, because if we harvested this September 30,000 pounds of carrots, we're in the same problem where we're trying to push it out the door. But if we build up our growing procedures alongside of our food rescue center, then we'll be able to actually create that frozen product. It means we can engage with local farmers and ask them to grow for us. So if we can't produce enough carrots, we can be out to local farmers in the area and say, can you produce this many carrots? Can you produce this many carrots? With the thought processes of never giving a can of carrots away again. Instead, we're giving frozen carrots away. They're better quality. They're better. They're more healthy.
We know where they came from.
We know where they came from. Yeah. They didn't get grown on a different continent and shipped around the world and then processed and then moved somewhere else to be packaged. We have control over the kind of entire spectrum. So we're very excited about how that has kind of developed from having this infrastructure piece. And the infrastructure is kind of the key piece, is having that food rescue center so that we can then start to look at how the food bank network plays into food purchasing, plays into food creation, and plays into that processing side.
So now what's it going to take to have that a reality?
So we've been working hard on that, and we've got a big event coming up on May 8th. That's a Food for Thought luncheon with Michael McCain from Maple Leaf Foods and Blair Hislop from Mrs. Dunster's Donuts as our keynote speakers. Yeah. So they're going to be having a fireside chat. Yeah, and they're amazing. I had a chance to talk with both of them, and they're just so passionate about food and food security. And so we're having a fireside chat. I'm going to moderate it, and I get to be the one asking the questions instead of answering them. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. And we have some pretty big announcements that are coming out as a result of that. So I don't want to steal my own thunder.
So, but the public are going to hear a lot about this next week.
Absolutely.
And this is a fascinating project that really is going to make the difference for a lot of New Brunswickers and Atlantic Canadians and Canadians.
Yeah. And so one of the fun parts is the kind of partnerships that are coming. So, the Food Depot out of Montreal for the distribution. Food Banks Canada is very, very excited about the project. They've come on as a major supporter at the beginning, and they're also going to increase staffing capacity in New Brunswick for food procurement to help feed the center, to make sure it's got lots of food coming in to be processed. Because what they believe, and I agree with them completely, is that a center like this will prove as a model, and we can then use this model and do it in other parts of Canada.
Because the lady, the story I read there on, I think it was CTV, but the lady that was with Food Banks Canada, she said it's a unique, maybe they're doing it some in small towns, like where they can, in a small, very small scale.
Yes.
But for something like this, it's a unique, if not one of a kind, across Canada. Yeah. And that's amazing.
I think food banks have all taken on this role as much as they can in their own limited facilities. This is the first time, and someone said, we're creating a facility specifically to do this on scale and support a wide variety of organizations. So when Food Banks Canada saw that, they said, well, if this is proven successful, which we know it will be, this is something that we can go to the prairies, we can go to Alberta, we can go to we can go to BC, we can go to Ontario and say, where should we have more of these centers to feed? New Brunswick is a unique situation, right? We're relatively small, relatively small population, so it's a great place to kind of cut our teeth on this concept and then start to download it in different places in the country.
Well, yes, and there's been over the last 200 years many examples where New Brunswick has set an example Canada-wide, and this is just another example.
Yeah,
so that's excellent. You must be pumped up.
I'm pretty
excited. A lot of
excited.
work to get there, but still pumped up even that you're getting to this phase.
I'm 2 parts equally excited and exhausted. That's just part of the nature of it. But it's been exciting to watch it develop and get to where it is. I certainly would encourage people to keep an eye on our Facebook page and on, I'm sure in the news and whatnot for the big announcements that are coming, because I think we all have a role to play in making something like this reality. And certainly what we're doing today, talking about it and helping people to understand the kind of goals of it and where we're going with it is a big part. But there's a way that everybody can be engaged in a project like this, and we certainly think that this is a project that warrants very wide engagement in the community.
Yeah.
So apart from your some of your fundraising efforts and regular donations, do you have any major fundraisers coming up? I know a couple of years ago I bought a rain barrel. Is that an annual fundraiser?
Yeah, unfortunately we didn't do the rain barrel fundraiser this year.
Okay.
But we are looking to do that again in 2025. Oh my soul, that sounds scary, doesn't it?
It does.
It does.
2025.
When you said
only a year away.
When you said 2030, I'm thinking it's a long time away.
It's not.
It's not that
No,
long
it's
away.
not. It's like,
So I cut you off there, but
Yeah, no. So we're looking to do the Rain Barrel fundraiser again. We love fundraisers that match us, and
Yes.
the Rain Barrel one just matches us well. We do our own collection of rainwater to feed our gardens. It just matches really well. So we'll do that again. We didn't do it this year just because we have quite a few irons in the fire at this moment. But and certainly we'll be doing. You're going to be hearing a lot about us in the coming weeks as we talk about what we need to do to get ourselves to be able to create this food rescue center. And I think it's going to be really exciting for the community when they start to get there.
yeah, so that's great. And then
I wish I could share you more, but we're just. If it was this time next week, it'd be a totally different ballgame.
you got us on pins and needles.
Yeah,
Good,
Pins
I'm
and
glad.
needles. It sounds really exciting. And as always, anybody that wants to volunteer time, money, resources, knowledge, check out the Facebook page.
Absolutely.
Google Greener Village and or drop in.
Drop by.
Yeah,
See what they can do to help. And I don't think you'd turn too many people away.
I would always encourage a tour. You've been in for a tour
I have,
before.
several.
I think that until you take a tour, you don't really understand just how
Magnitude of it.
how
Yeah.
interesting Greener Village
And how many
is.
people are moving there doing things? The
Usually-
volunteers they're working.
Every tour, I'm like, oh, just set this way a little bit. I think last time I had to move Jeff a little bit out of the way because the volunteers are like bees.
Yeah.
They're working.
They were working.
And I get in their way giving tours, but it's an important part of understanding what Greener Village is to the community, is to see it in action and to understand the scope. It's probably very different than what your mind has told you it is. So I always encourage people to come in and schedule that tour.
Well, I got to do that. The last time I was there at the Greener Village was, I think, 12 years ago. So I've got to come. And
that's right.
A lot has changed, I imagine.
We'll bring Jody.
Yeah, that's right. The three of us.
Bring the Carr brothers
Yeah.
down.
That sounds amazing.
Well, we've only got about a minute left. Alex, anything you'd like to say for parting words?
I can't say thank you enough for the opportunity. We often in food banking are so busy working that we don't stop to talk about the work. But talking about the work is an important part of making sure people understand what we're doing. So thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about Greener Village and our passion for what we're doing. And stay tuned. Lots of good stuff coming.
Well, that's great. And the difference that you make is outstanding for New Brunswickers. And we really, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
We really do.
great
Keep
to
up the good work.
Will do.
And you're probably 30 to 40 years from retirement, so hang in there.
We'll have you on again.
Yeah, that's right. I'll come back in a few years. It'll be interesting to talk about it from the other side of it being a completed project.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we don't have time now to talk too much about our story, but we certainly know when people and families are in need, how important it is for organizations like yourself to reach out. So, or to be there, I should say, for people that reach out. So thank you very much. Alex Boyd with the Fredericton Greener Village has been on our show. If you've watched the show, I know you'd agree that it was outstanding to be able to hear about the Greener Village. And we just want to thank our viewers for watching, and if you can help out in any way, contact the Greener Village.
Yeah, absolutely. And have a great week. We'll see you all next week.
See you.